Why is it that we can look into a mirror every day and still not really see ourselves? Why do we sometimes feel a sudden surge of anger, envy, or judgment, and afterward think, "That's not me. I don't know where that came from"? Could it be that parts of us are hidden, not gone, but quietly living in the basement of the psyche, waiting for us to notice them? Carl Jung called this hidden dimension the shadow. It is the side of us that doesn't fit into the polished story we tell about who we are. It's not always evil, though we often imagine it that way. Instead, it's the unaccepted, repressed, unacknowledged parts of our personality. Our forbidden desires, our unspoken fears, our secret longings, even our strength when we're too afraid to claim it. As Jung wrote, everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. This means that the more we deny it, the more power it gains over us. The shadow does not disappear because we refuse to see it. On the contrary, it becomes stronger, slipping into our behaviors, our relationships, our judgments, until one day we realize we are not as in control as we thought. But here's the paradox. The shadow is not only the source of our darkest impulses. It is also the key to our deepest transformation. As Jung believed, we cannot become whole without meeting what we have hidden. The path toward authenticity, or what he called individuation, runs directly through the terrain of the shadow. So what exactly is this dark side? How do we recognize it? And most importantly, how do we learn to live with it without letting it consume us? Today, we will gently step into this hidden territory. We'll explore not with fear, but with curiosity. Because maybe the shadow isn't here to destroy us. Maybe, just maybe, it's here to complete us. If you think back to childhood, you'll notice something fascinating. Children are raw, unfiltered, full of life. They scream when they're angry, cry when they're sad, laugh wildly when something delights them. There are no masks, no edits. But little by little, that freedom begins to shrink. Parents, teachers, society, all with good intentions, begin to guide, correct, and shape us. Don't be so loud. Boys don't cry. Good girls don't get angry. Don't be selfish. Each message plants a seed inside. We learn which parts of us are acceptable and which parts are dangerous, embarrassing, or unlovable. Slowly, we start pushing those forbidden parts out of sight. We tuck them into an invisible bag that we drag behind us. Jung called this bag the shadow. In it, we stuff all the traits we believe are wrong. Anger, desire, envy, ambition, even joy if it feels too much. We don't destroy these parts, we just bury them. But here's the truth. What we hide doesn't disappear. It waits. It seeps out in sideways ways, in sarcasm, in sudden emotional outbursts, in the people we despise most. Jung observed that what irritates us most in others often points to something we have rejected in ourselves. He called this projection. When I can't admit to my own aggression, I see the world as full of aggressive people. When I can't acknowledge my own selfishness, I find it everywhere outside me. As Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The shadow, then, is not just about personal quirks. It shapes our destiny in ways we barely notice. Understanding this helps us see that the shadow isn't a flaw, it's a psychological necessity. Without it, we wouldn't know how to belong, how to adapt. But if we never open that bag and look inside, we risk becoming strangers to ourselves. The question becomes, how do we find the courage to face what we've hidden? How do we make peace with what we were taught to reject? You might imagine the shadow as something dramatic, a dark double waiting in the background to sabotage us. But in truth, it rarely appears in such obvious ways. More often, It sneaks into our everyday lives disguised as little reactions, subtle patterns, quiet whispers that we barely notice. Think about relationships. How many times have you been triggered by something small, a tone of voice, a forgotten text, a careless word? The anger or hurt that erupts in you often feels bigger than the situation itself. That's the shadow speaking. A wound, a hidden part of you, has been touched. You're not just reacting to the present, you're reacting to all the past moments you buried inside. In the workplace, the shadow might show up as envy toward a colleague's success. On the surface, you might dismiss it as dislike or even righteous judgment. But underneath, the shadow is reminding you of your own ambition, your own hunger for recognition, which you've pushed away because somewhere along the line you were told it was selfish to want too much. Even in moments of joy, the shadow can slip in. Imagine achieving something wonderful and immediately hearing an inner voice whisper, "Don't get too proud. You don't deserve this." That's also the shadow, the internalized critic, often carrying the voices of parents, teachers, or cultural rules long forgotten consciously, but still alive in your psyche. Jung often noted that what we refuse to accept in ourselves becomes our jailer. The shadow limits our freedom, dictating what we can and cannot express. And yet, paradoxically, it is also the key to our growth. By listening to its signals, we discover where our wholeness is waiting. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. In other words, the shadow is not our enemy. It is our greatest teacher, pointing toward the places we need to reclaim. So the next time you feel triggered, jealous, or unreasonably upset, pause. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with them?" try asking, "What part of me have I left in the dark?" That question is the first step in transforming shadow into strength. It's easy to think of the shadow as a monster, something ugly we must fight off. But Jung taught us something far more radical. The shadow is not only where we bury our shame and fear. It's also where we hide our greatest gifts. Imagine a child who is naturally bold, expressive, and creative. Maybe they love to dance wildly, sing at the top of their lungs, or speak their mind without hesitation. But if the adults around them said, "Stop showing off. You're embarrassing yourself," that child learns to dim their light. Over time, their natural creativity is tucked away in the shadow. What once was brilliance becomes a dangerous trait. Or think of someone who has a natural sense of leadership. As a child, maybe they were called bossy or told they were too much. So they suppressed that energy, only to grow into an adult who hesitates to take charge, while secretly resenting others who do. This is why Jung called the shadow the seat of creativity. Everything we push down, whether anger, passion, or even joy, doesn't disappear. It waits, transformed into raw energy. And when we finally dare to face it, that same energy can become fuel for authenticity, for art, for love, for leadership. As Jung said, the gold is in the dark. It means that in the very place we fear to look, we might find the thing we've been missing all along. The anger we denied could become healthy boundaries. The jealousy we felt could point us toward our true desires. The sadness we avoided could open the door to deeper compassion. The shadow is not just darkness. It's the container for our unlived life. Every no, we once heard echoes there, waiting for us to return and say, "Yes, you belong." But here's the catch. Meeting the shadow requires courage. It asks us to admit things we'd rather not. It asks us to forgive ourselves for being human. And it asks us to trust that what we buried isn't poison, it's potential. So the next time you feel resistance to a part of yourself, pause and listen. Ask, what gift might be hidden here? What light is waiting in this dark? Because sometimes The shadow isn't trying to destroy you. It's trying to return you to your wholeness. If the shadow holds so much hidden treasure, then why do we resist it so fiercely? Why do we prefer to live with blind spots rather than open the door to what we've buried? The answer lies in one simple truth. The ego, the image we build of ourselves, is fragile. From childhood, we construct a version of me that feels safe, lovable, and acceptable to others. This self-image becomes our mask, what Jung called the persona. It's how we want to be seen. And anything that doesn't fit this image gets pushed underground. For example, if you were praised for being the good child, you learned to associate worth with obedience. Anger or rebellion didn't fit, so they were exiled to the shadow. If you were valued for being smart, maybe vulnerability felt dangerous, so you hid your softness. The shadow terrifies us because it threatens that carefully built persona. To admit, I am jealous, I am angry, or even, I want more than I let myself have, feels like risking rejection. We fear others will turn away if they see what we're hiding. And sometimes, even worse, we fear we ourselves won't survive meeting those parts. That's why the psyche develops clever defenses: denial, projection, rationalization. We twist reality just enough to avoid seeing what feels unbearable. Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, in order to avoid facing their own soul." And isn't it true? How often do we distract ourselves with work, entertainment, or even spiritual practices? Anything but sitting with the discomfort of what's hidden within. But here's the paradox. The more we resist the shadow, the stronger its grip. What we refuse to face doesn't go away. It leaks out. It shows up in our judgments, in our relationships, in the patterns we repeat no matter how hard we try to change. The shadow is like a locked room in our house. We can avoid it for years, but deep down we always know it's there. And the longer we wait, the more haunted it feels. Yet once we gather the courage to open the door, we often discover that what lives inside isn't a monster. It's a wounded child waiting to be seen. So maybe the real question isn't, what if I face my shadow and it destroys me? But what if I never face it and it quietly runs my life forever? If there is one place where the shadow dances most visibly, it is in our relationships. Love has a way of pulling up everything we've hidden, everything we've denied. Jung often warned that marriage, friendship, and intimacy are not just about romance or companionship. They are arenas where the unconscious comes alive. Think about it. When you fall in love, you're not only seeing the other person, you're also projecting onto them. The qualities you long for, admire, or even fear, you place onto your partner like a screen. This is why new love feels so intoxicating. You're not just meeting them. You're meeting parts of yourself you've lost or repressed. But projections don't last forever. Eventually, the reality of the other person begins to shine through. And that's when the shadow makes its presence known. Suddenly, the very traits that once enchanted you now irritate or wound you. Their independence feels like distance. Their passion feels like selfishness. Their calm feels like coldness. And deep down, these reactions often have less to do with them and more to do with what you've buried in yourself. For example, if you've repressed your own anger, you might constantly find yourself entangled with angry people. If you've denied your neediness, you may judge your partner as too clingy. This is the shadow at work, showing you, through the mirror of relationship, the parts of yourself you refuse to acknowledge. As Jung wrote, the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. That transformation often begins with conflict. The fights we have, the disappointments we face, the patterns we repeat. All of these are invitations from the shadow. The question is, Do we use relationships to escape ourselves or to discover ourselves? If we choose the latter, then every trigger, every conflict becomes a doorway. Instead of blaming the other, we ask, what part of me is being revealed here? What shadow is asking for attention? In this way, relationships become sacred laboratories. They test us, yes, but more importantly, they guide us toward wholeness. And perhaps love's deepest purpose is not to complete us, as fairy tales suggest, but to reveal to us the unfinished work within. So far, we've explored the shadow on a personal level. But Jung also spoke of something larger, the collective shadow. Just as individuals repress unwanted traits, entire societies do the same. And when the collective shadow is ignored, it erupts with even greater force. Think of history. Every culture has its ideals, what is considered good, civilized, or moral. But in the name of those ideals, cultures often repress entire dimensions of human nature. For example, societies that worship productivity tend to repress rest, play, and tenderness. Communities that glorify strength may suppress vulnerability and emotional depth. These disowned qualities don't vanish. They accumulate in the collective shadow, waiting for expression. Jung warned that when groups deny their shadow, it often emerges in destructive ways, through prejudice, scapegoating, or mass hysteria. We see it when communities blame outsiders for their own hidden fears, or when entire nations project their aggression onto enemies. As he wrote, "The world will ask you who you are, and if you do not know, the world will tell you." This is true not only for individuals, but for civilizations. But the collective shadow isn't only about darkness. Just like the personal shadow, it also contains suppressed potential. Consider how, for centuries, societies devalued intuition, creativity, or feminine wisdom. Those qualities went underground, branded as irrational or weak. And yet today, we are witnessing a resurgence, a collective remembering of what was once denied. Understanding the collective shadow helps us see our time differently. The conflicts, polarizations, and upheavals we face are not just signs of collapse. They are signs of what Jung called enantiodromia, the swing of the pendulum, the return of what was suppressed. The shadow is surfacing, not to destroy, but to demand integration. This is why personal work on the shadow matters so much. Every time one of us chooses to face our own darkness instead of projecting it outward, we contribute to healing the collective. As Jung reminded us, the change must begin with the individual. So the shadow is not just personal baggage. It is a thread that connects us to humanity's deepest struggles and to its greatest possibilities. While the shadow often hides in our daily reactions and relationships, it also appears in a place where our masks fall away completely, our dreams. Jung called dreams the royal road to the unconscious. In them, the shadow doesn't whisper. It speaks openly, though often in symbolic language. Think of a recurring dream where you are chased. The pursuer might look like a stranger, a wild animal, or even a monstrous figure. It feels terrifying, but beneath the fear is a message. This is a disowned part of yourself trying to catch your attention. The more you run, the more it chases. Integration begins when you turn around and ask, "What do you want to show me?" Sometimes the shadow appears as figures we despise in waking life. The cruel boss, the manipulative friend, the trickster. In dreams, these figures are not just about other people. They are symbols of the qualities we reject in ourselves. Jung explained this through archetypes, universal patterns of the psyche that show up across cultures and times. The villain, the thief, the seducer, each is not only an external danger, but also an inner image of the shadow. Art, stories, And myths also serve as mirrors of the shadow. Think of fairy tales filled with witches, dragons, or dark forests. Or modern films where the bad guy is strangely compelling. These images touch something deep in us because they reflect the battle within, the struggle to face what we hide. As Jung wrote, the shadow is a moral problem that challenges the whole ego personality, for no one can become conscious of the shadow without considerable moral effort. But there's a secret. When we allow these symbols to speak, we unlock a dialogue with the unconscious. Writing down dreams, reflecting on powerful myths, or noticing which villains or tricksters fascinate us. All of these are ways the psyche gives us clues. The shadow is not silent. It constantly tries to be seen. To understand the shadow, then, is not only to analyze our behavior, but to listen to the language of images, dreams, and symbols. For in those hidden stories, we meet the parts of ourselves that logic alone cannot reach. By now, the shadow might feel less like a monster and more like a hidden companion, one we've ignored, but who never left our side. The question is, how do we begin to meet it in everyday life? Jung believed that awareness is the first step, but awareness must be lived. The shadow reveals itself only through honest, consistent practice. Here are a few ways to start. 1. Notice your triggers. Whenever you feel a sudden, strong emotional reaction, anger, jealousy, judgment, pause. Instead of asking, "What's wrong with them?" ask, "What part of me is being touched here?" The shadow often enters through intensity. If it feels disproportionate, it's probably pointing inward. 2. Journal with honesty. Jung himself encouraged his patients to dialogue with their inner world. Take a notebook and write freely about the parts of yourself you don't usually admit. The envy, the pride, the desire, the secret fears. At first it may feel uncomfortable, even shameful. But on paper, the shadow begins to take form, and what is named starts to lose its power. 3. Work with dreams. Keep a dream journal by your bed. Write down images, figures, and emotions, even fragments. Over time, you may notice patterns, the same stranger appearing, the same landscapes, the same mood. These are the footprints of the shadow, inviting you to listen. 4. Practice projection recall. Jung suggested looking at the people who irritate or fascinate you most. Ask yourself, what quality do they embody that I have disowned in myself? It doesn't mean you are them, but their presence may be reflecting something you've pushed away. 5. Create space for the unacceptable. This might sound strange, but try giving a voice to the part of you you'd rather silence. If you're angry, write a letter from your anger. If you're jealous, let jealousy speak for a moment. This is not to justify harmful behavior, but to acknowledge that these parts exist. Integration begins with recognition. As Jung said, "I'd rather be whole than good." Facing the shadow is not about becoming morally perfect. It's about becoming real. It's about allowing the full spectrum of your humanity to exist, so you are no longer at war with yourself. The shadow will not vanish overnight. It's a lifelong companion, but the more you meet it, the less it rules you from the dark. Instead, it becomes a guide, sometimes fierce, sometimes tender, leading you toward authenticity. When we finally begin to face the shadow, something remarkable happens. The very parts we once feared start to reveal themselves not as enemies, but as hidden allies. What once felt like shame turns into wisdom. What once looked like weakness begins to show itself as strength. Take anger, for example. Left in the dark, it can explode destructively. But when integrated, anger becomes clarity and boundary. It teaches us to say no with dignity, to protect what matters. Or envy. In the shadow, it poisons relationships. But once faced, envy points to what we truly desire: guiding us toward the unlived life calling within us. Even sadness, when denied, becomes heaviness. But embraced, it deepens our compassion, softens our hearts, makes us human. This is why Jung insisted that integration of the shadow is not just about morality, it's about becoming whole. One does not become whole by suppressing what one considers evil, but by integrating it, he wrote. Integration doesn't mean acting out every impulse. It means bringing awareness, choice, and balance to the forces within us. As the shadow is faced, something shifts inside. We become less controlled by unconscious reactions, less trapped in endless projections. Life begins to feel lighter, not because it's easier, but because we're no longer fighting ourselves. Jung described this as individuation, the process of becoming who we truly are, beyond masks and fears. Creativity often blossoms here. Many artists, writers, and visionaries have said their deepest inspiration comes from the places they once avoided. When you stop censoring yourself, your imagination opens. Your art, your work, even your relationships begin to carry more depth, more truth. And perhaps most importantly, freedom emerges. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to live without constant inner denial. The freedom to stand in your contradictions and still belong to yourself. To be both gentle and fierce, joyful and sorrowful, light and dark, because wholeness is not about choosing one side. It's about embracing all of it. In this way, the shadow transforms from something we fear into something we trust. Not a monster under the bed, but a companion who walks beside us, whispering the truths we most need to hear. So what is the shadow really? After this journey, maybe we can see it more clearly. It is the sum of all we have denied, all we have hidden, all we were once told was too much or not enough. It is the echo of childhood rules, the weight of cultural expectations, the face we turned away from in the mirror. But if Jung was right, and his work still resonates so powerfully because it rings true, then the shadow is not here to destroy us. It is here to complete us, to remind us that wholeness is not light without darkness, but light woven with darkness, like day folding into night. As Jung said, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. The shadow challenges us, confronts us, even frightens us. Yet in walking through that pain, we discover treasures we could never have found in the safety of denial. Courage, creativity, depth, compassion, power. And here's the deeper truth. When you meet your shadow, you not only heal yourself, you shift the field around you. The triggers lessen, the projections soften, and relationships become more authentic. You no longer demand that others carry your hidden parts, because you've claimed them as your own. This quiet work of inner integration ripples outward, touching your family, your community, even the collective. Maybe this is why Jung saw individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole, as humanity's great task. Each of us, by facing the shadow, contributes to something larger. A culture less ruled by projection, a society less trapped in denial, a world where we can hold complexity without needing to divide everything into good and bad. The shadow will never vanish. And perhaps it shouldn't, because it is not an enemy, but a teacher, one that walks with us from birth to death. Its presence keeps us humble, grounded, human. It reminds us that perfection is not the goal, authenticity is. So the next time you feel jealousy, anger, fear, or shame rising inside, pause. Instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this?" ask, "What is this part of me trying to teach?" Because the shadow is not a punishment. It is an invitation to step into your own wholeness, to live more fully, to carry both your light and your dark with grace. And maybe, just maybe, This is the deepest freedom of all, to be fully yourself, unedited, unmasked, whole. If these words touched something deep inside you, if they helped you see your own inner world with new eyes, then let's keep walking this path together. Every subscription, every like, every repost is not just a number. It's a signal that conversations like this matter, that there is a hunger for depth in a world often rushing toward the surface, that there are souls like yours who long to see behind the mask, who are ready to meet both light and shadow with courage. When you subscribe, you join a circle of seekers, people who believe that self-knowledge is not luxury, but necessity. When you like and share, you help these ideas ripple out into the collective, reaching others who might be quietly searching for the same answers, the same healing, the same awakening. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." And if that resonates with you, then this space was built for you. A place for reflection, a place for honest conversation, a place where together we can explore the mysteries of the psyche, the heart, and the soul. So if you feel called, support this journey. Subscribe, like, repost, not just for the channel, but for the bigger work we are all part of, the work of becoming whole. Because each time you choose awareness over denial, love over projection, authenticity over masks, you are not only changing yourself, you are quietly reshaping the world.